Hey guys, Rick Taylor with KS USA here. Today we're going to talk about how to service your E10 and E10R seat post. Okay, so some of the basic tools that we're going to need to service KS dropper we'll go over here. If there are additional or specific or specialty tools for your particular model that we're going to go over, we'll discuss those in further detail a little bit later on in the video. So you want to start with a good quality biodegradable degreaser. We tend to like the Simple Green cleaners here. You can dilute them down to whatever ratio you want. They wash away easily, and they're not caustic or damaging. So a good degreaser. For lubrication, we recommend either the KS Post Paste, or if you don't have that available, the Slick Oleum is basically the same formula. It's designed specifically for suspension use, more specifically air oil systems, so it's a really good lubrication to use. We don't recommend using automotive grease because they tend to be a higher viscosity and can cause poor performance of your dropper if you use those. A pair of soft jaws so that you can hold the seat post. The one that we have here happens to have a round clamp hole in it, but if you can't find one of these in your local market, you can also do a V-block, which a lot of times you can get those from Amazon or from a local hardware store, a machine shop supply. Those kind of places have them. And essentially you just need something that you're going to be able to clamp and hold the tube. If you don't have access to that, don't panic. You can also use the bicycle frame to hold the post in place while we unthread the collar. We'll go over that in a little more detail later. Utility knife, we generally will use this just to help us remove the guide bushings. So these are handy to have. If you don't have one, you can do it by using your fingernail, but I'd recommend if you can find a utility knife, definitely grab that. A set of Allen wrenches. So you're going to need from a 6 down to a 1.5 millimeter set. So they can either be a T-handle like this, or you can have one of the little pocket folding ones work great too. But just make sure they're good quality so you don't end up rounding or stripping out any of the bolts. Last would be a strap wrench. And the strap wrench is basically to remove the collar. You'll need these on nearly all models of KS dropper, with the exception of the A12 Integra and the Rage I. So those two will use a little different system that we'll talk about later. But the strap wrench you can get from most hardware stores, and they're generally used for fitting pipes that you don't want to do damage to. So if they're a chrome finish or something, these allow you to grab and turn pipe without damaging the surface. So local hardware stores, and again, this is called a strap wrench. And then we definitely like to use a microfiber towel for cleaning and the internal parts and everything. These work really well with the degreaser. They tend to take all of the debris off of your post. So you can get these through most hardware stores, or if you have a Costco in your area, they do their Kirkland brand of towels that work really well. So we're going to talk about how to service your E10 and E10 remote. Basically, both of these posts are the same. The only difference is the E10 has the actuator lever here under the saddle, and the E10 remote has a smaller lever that attaches to your remote cable and is actuated by a handlebar remote. So the internals are the same. So for this video, we're just going to go over the E10 model, but rest assured that both of those are serviced exactly the same. So in addition to the tools that we showed earlier in this video, you'll want to use a 17 millimeter socket. Essentially, it's going to go just inside the end cap. And then you want to have a hammer here. And with the hammer, you're just going to tap this. All the way around. And what we're doing, there's a thread lock compound in there. So by that slight impact, we break that loose, and you're going to be able to get your 5 millimeter wrench in and turn this without damaging it. Now, if you were to just try to crank on that without tapping it to break it loose, the thread lock might have enough force to hold that in place, and you start rounding out this alloy end cap. So it's important that you do that. And then we'll go ahead and push this out, and The next step we're going to want to do is use our soft jaws. Now, we talked about this earlier in the video that if you didn't have these, you could use your bicycle seat tube. So you could slide this down in and clamp that into your bike, and then proceed with using the strap wrench to undo the collar here. But we're just going to go ahead and clamp it in the vise. It's going to be a lot easier for you to see this demonstration than if we go over and try to put it in the bike. So we're going to take our strap wrench. Actually, we got to go the other way because we're going to loosen it. Okay, so we're going to unthread the seal collar. Slide that up. Okay. And go ahead and set the soft jaws aside. And then this next step, you want to be careful with this because if you over torque it, you can damage your cartridge. So you just want to grab this just tight enough to hold it in place. And we're going to take our 5mm and you can unthread the end cap. So just get it just tight enough to break it loose. We're going to take the end cap out and set it aside. Okay, I'm going to slide this apart. And essentially what you're going to want to service in a normal servicing, you're going to take out your upper guide bushing here. You're going to use the utility knife we talked about and just catch the edge of that bushing. Now, there's two different bushings inside. There's a POM bushing. These are designed to preload the system so you don't get any side-to-side rattle. And then you have a brass bushing or a metallic bushing in here. And again, you'll just catch that and knock it out. And there's going to be 3 sets of them. So 3 metallic, 3 POM. Let's go ahead and take those out. Now the next step is to go ahead and slide your seal collar down. Okay, so we're going to want to take a little bit of degreaser. We're going to go inside. We're going to clean that all really good, both inside and out. Okay, and we can go ahead and re-lubricate this. And what we're doing is we're taking the grease and putting the grease in the cavity in the seal. So it's important to fill that up with grease and get that packed in there real good, and then just a thin coat on the DU bushing. And we can set that aside. Next, we're going to go ahead and use that degreaser and clean stanchion. Once we get that all clean, we can go ahead and install the seal back on. Okay. And now, if you've had an issue with your oil cartridge and you need to replace that, and that's the reason that you've taken the post apart in the first place, what we want to do is I would start with your 6mm and just take this top clamp completely off. And then we're going to take a 2mm, put it in the Allen on this cross pin. We're going to unthread that. We're going to push this pin out. Okay. Then you want to flip this upside down, get it a few taps, and your push rod and your spring are going to come out along with the push rod itself. Now, you'll take a 4mm Allen, and this goes down into the hole. And looking from the top, you actually want to turn this clockwise to unscrew it because it's threaded from the bottom side. So you're going to turn opposite the way you think you would. So you want to turn that clockwise. And then that cartridge comes out. Now, if you're servicing your post and you live in wet conditions or ride the bike out in the snow a lot, it's a good idea when you do your normal bushing and maintenance service every 3 months, to go ahead and take this apart, clean it all really good, use a little bit of the slick honey and put that all over the shaft here and a thin layer on the cartridge itself. That's going to help displace any water and make this thing last a lot longer. Now, if you have had an issue with your cartridge, if it's worn out and needs to be replaced, now would be the time to replace with the new cartridge. And now we'll go over the process of putting it back in. So this just goes back inside. And again, if there was any water on this when it came out, make sure you dry everything inside. Put a little bit of grease inside there as well. We'll skip that point because this was all dry when we took it apart. Okay, so we'll thread this in by hand. And at some point, you're going to feel a little bit of resistance, like right there. We're going to put the 4mm back inside. And now again, we're going to turn it counterclockwise because it's threading from the bottom. And just do it so that it's snug. Again, we can clean this with the degreaser. Use some slick honey and apply on it. We're going to install that back in. Now, if you have any debris or anything here in the head, that's a good time to clean it out. Okay. Again, a little bit of slick honey on the spring and on the push rod, and we'll put that back in. So we've got our Allen through the pin, and that's all lined up, ready to go. So we'll take the pin, put it on our other Allen wrench, and go ahead and basically kind of thread the needle through. And the way that I'm doing this is just trying to get the end of this to line up. And it's honestly a little bit fiddly. You'll just have to push it through. Okay, so we got that to slide through. And you can see the pin's in. Make sure you push the pin all the way in until you hit the threaded portion before you start turning it. Because if you start turning it and you don't have it seated all the way in, you're just going to keep turning and turning, and that thread won't actually grab. Okay, so then we're just going to do that a tiny bit more than finger tight. And then you go ahead and check that function. So we're good there. Okay, now the next job is to clean the inside of the mast tube. And the easiest way that I've found to do that is to just feed some microfiber towel down in there. If you want to use your Allen to kind of push it down in, you do that. A little bit of degreaser on this helps too, and you just pull it out. And this one's pretty clean inside, so there isn't a lot of debris, but when you're done, you can basically sight down the tube and look and make sure there's no debris or anything down inside. And we'll set that aside. Our next step will be to degrease and clean all the internal components. So the upper little bushing here, your pins. You can check these pins and make sure that there's no wear. They should be round, cylindrical shape. They should not have flat spots on them. If they do, you'll want to order a new set of guide bushings from your local dealer. But if they're all clean and have been maintained, they shouldn't wear. The lubrication should protect you from excessive wear. So then the next step is to go ahead and put these bushings back in place. Little trick that I found, you'll notice sometimes those will just drop out as you're trying to put them all in. So if you take a little bit of grease and you put the grease in the slot first, and then you put the bushing in, the grease will actually help that bushing stay in place. So we'll do that, and you go around to all three. The metal bushing goes to the bottom, the POM bushing goes to the top. Okay, and then I would just take a little extra grease and put on the top of these so you have extra lubrication going in. A little bit of lube down inside this tube as well. Just kind of wipe it in there so you have some lube that'll move around and keep everything properly lubricated. Now a little trick is if you put one finger here, your thumb here, and one finger here, you can hold all three of those in, so as you install this, you don't lose those bushings. And you go ahead and put this down, you'll feel it stop and then just kind of rotate it until you get all three to line up. And you see all three went in. Be really careful when you're sliding this down. Make sure that you keep those bushings in place. If they come out and you force it, you're going to damage those bushings. Okay, so once this is down in maybe an inch or two, then you can go ahead and put the top bushing in. Another important step is to make sure that you push this bushing in, and I like to just use the utility knife to just, and I'm not pushing this way with the cutting edge, but just pushing with the side of it to make sure that's seated. If you try to thread this seal collar down and that's not seated in, you're going to damage that bushing. So make sure that you seat it first, then go ahead and thread this down. We're just going to go to hand tight for now. Then we're going to clamp that cartridge back in again. Be really careful. If you over tighten this, you're going to damage the cartridge. We're going to take the end cap and thread it on. And we're going to thread it down until it stops by hand, and we're just going to slightly nudge it. It doesn't need a lot of torque. There's no rotational force on this when it works, so just slightly past hand tight is more than enough. Okay, then we're going to push this back in. We're going to take our 5mm. We're going to tighten this down. And honestly, if you hold this down on the bench and you tighten that by hand, that's tight enough to keep that end cap in. You really don't need to torque it anymore. And again, if you have the soft jaws, you can clamp those in. At this point, I would use a little bit more degreaser. And you probably got a little grease on your hands and you touch that seal collar. If that's got grease on it, it's gonna really muck up your strap wrench. So get that all really clean and then dry it. And then we're gonna put the strap wrench back on. It's gonna go the other direction this time because we wanna tighten. And it's hand tight and just a slight nudge, and that's tight enough. If you over tighten it, you may have trouble getting it off again the next time. And then the last bit of the process is I would go ahead and just cycle through. Make sure we have good clean function. Go ahead and put that back in the bike. And we took the clamps off here when we worked on the cartridge, so you'll of course want to put your clamps back on. When you're reinstalling these, it's a good time to go ahead and put some anti-seize compound on these parts and then put them together and make sure you use a torque wrench when you put that saddle back on. And that's pretty much it for the servicing of the E-Series.